classic book detailing UK alien abduction cases without consent has been updated. Philip Mantle and Carl Negatus are the authors, with Philip Mantle well versed in the area of alien abductions after heavily researching and working with Calvin Parker on the famous Pascagoula incident. Without Consent was first published in 1994, and Philip Mantle joins us now. Hello, Philip.
Nice to speak to you again, Dean.
Without Consent, by golly, it's 26 years since it was first published. How many times has it been updated?
This is the second time that the book has been updated. Originally in 1994, it came out in hardback first, and then a few years later, we launched it in a paperback format. So we updated it a little bit for the paperback, and then it's just been left dormant ever since. And like you said, after working with Calvin Parker this last couple of years, I came to the conclusion, rightly or wrongly, Dean, that there still is a lot of interest in this particular area of the UFO subject. And I looked around, and I think, I may be mistaken, but I think Without Consent is still the first and only book that deals with this phenomena from a UK perspective. So I thought, well, you know, I've continued down the years, you know, speaking to people, interviewing them, collecting data. Why not update it for, you know, the present day audience? As we know, Dean, you know, lots of new people join the subject every year, so they will have no idea about Without Consent and what it originally was. So I decided to go ahead, and hey presto, it's out now.
Well, the alien abduction topic and I guess the contact experience topic has just exploded in the last few years, with so many people now coming out and telling their story. Have you seen somewhat of a change in attitude towards alien abductions from the public in the last 26 years?
There's been a change all around, Dean. I mean, if we go back to, you know, the early 1990s, Without Consent originally was designed as a television documentary. My colleague Carl Negatus was a long-standing professional journalist working in what was Fleet Street. He's worked for some of the biggest newspapers in the country. And I'd done a couple of features with Carl. He left journalism and set up his own public relations company. And one of his clients was a television production company who said, "You don't happen to know anybody in the UFO field, do you?" And he said, "Well, it just so happens." And they originally commissioned for me and Carl to research and write a documentary, which we did. But then they pulled the plug. For whatever reason, it never got made. So we turned it into a book instead. Now, in those days, of course, we're talking, you know, pre-internet, really. We knew of a few sort of well-known cases, but getting people to talk, Dean, was very difficult, you know. So I literally, along with Carl, traveled from one end of the UK to the other, interviewing as many people as I could in person. And you'll see in the book, there's a few pseudonyms we've used because people didn't want their real names revealed and that kind of thing, which is fine. But what I have noticed down the years, still keeping in touch with the subject, is that both abductees, as I'll still call them, and the general public are much more willing now to be accepted. There still is a stigma attached to the subject, let's make no mistake about that. But I found that more and more people are willing to say, look, I don't care what others think. This is what happened to me. This is what I remember. And that's it. You know, you either believe me or you don't. I don't really care. And at this moment in time, with this last couple of years, there's been an increased interest in the subject for a variety of reasons. So I think the general public is much more accepting than it was when we first published the book. So that kind of interest goes in peaks and troughs, Dean, as I'm sure you're aware. But you know, I think at the moment, because of certain things that have happened, and people are more willing to say, well, perhaps there is something to this after all.
Well, I've probably recorded probably 30 interviews just on people who what are termed as contact experience or abductees just in the last, I'd say, probably 8 months. I'd imagine if I tried to do that 26 years ago, it'd take me forever to get that number of people to come forward and speak about it.
Absolutely. You know, we had the same problem originally. That's why the original publication, when it came out in hardback, was somewhere around 60,000 words, which is not a lot for a book of that. You know, it's sort of on the low side. But when you see the book now, it's probably twice that size. You know, simply because more people are willing to speak either openly or, you know, yes, I'll tell you, but you know, please don't mention my name because of my career or family or, you know, whatever reason. So there is, you know, it's a lot easier now. And of course, we have all the media's changed. We have all the technology to help. You know, thankfully, for the updated version, I didn't have to go careering up and down the UK again. You know, so it was a lot easier in that respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you know, it's not surprising to hear you say that, Dean. I would totally agree with you there.
Yeah, yeah, and also, you know, a lot of skeptics will say, well, they've only come out because, you know, they can get a book deal and they can get a bit of fame. But to be honest, there is a very, very, very low percentage of people who have come out and spoken about their situation that are making, you know, even a minute amount of money. I mean, books don't really make you money.
No, I mean, you know, I hope this sells a few copies, but none of the individuals involved will you know, are in it for the money. Like I say, a number of them were reluctant to come forward in the first place. But what we have emphasised, and I think this will come across in the interviews you've done, is that these people are just like you and I. They're everyday folk. The last thing that was on their mind when they had these experiences was UFOs. Most of them had no connection to it or very little knowledge of it at all. You know, they were going home from work, out walking their dog, taking a walk in the fields, you know, whatever. One of whom, you know, one of the gentlemen in the book is a police officer. He was actually in his patrol car on duty at the time. You know, all he was looking for some cows that had gone missing overnight. All he was thinking is, let me find these cows and let me get clocked off for the night, you know. You know, we've remarked that the Alien Abduction Club is probably one of the only clubs that no one wants to be a member of, Dean. You know, it's as simple as that. And these individuals are as puzzled and bewildered as the rest of us. After we published the original version of the book, we did a little poll, and we asked the experiencers, the abductees, what do you think happened to you? You know, here I am on the outside looking in.
Yep.
Some said definitely thought these were, you know, aliens from wherever. A couple of others thought this was some kind of spiritual experience. Others said, I just, no idea, Philip. That's why we came to you, hoping you might be able to tell us, you know. So even the abductees themselves were you know, had different opinions about what happened. And I think the skeptical viewpoint has moved somewhat as well. You mentioned the last couple of years I've been working with a well-known abductee by the name of Calvin Parker in Pascagoula, Mississippi. I won't go into his story because it's a long one anyway. But I read an article written by arch skeptic Philip Klass back in the 1970s when Calvin's encounter took place. And he just dismissed it as a hoax, you know, as simple as that. And then I moved forward in time to the current batch of skeptics. And I read another article by a skeptical researcher, part of the same organization that Philip Klass was. And he now doesn't say that Calvin Parker and Charlie Hickson's incident was a hoax. He says it was some kind of psychological phenomena. So even the skeptics, although I don't think they realize this, Dean, have moved themselves. They're now saying, yes, these people do have a genuine experience, but we just believe we've got an answer for it. So, you know, there's been a shift in that respect as well.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence is so overwhelming now that I think the skeptics themselves are frightened to come out and you know, pour hot water on any claim.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you one example that still baffles me to this day. There's a lady in the book called Jane Murphy, and Jane didn't live far from where I did. She initially contacted me about a UFO sighting she'd had as a teenager. So I went along to interview her because she was close by. And she went on to tell me she'd had this very complicated abduction experience as well when she was in her 20s. She was the same age as me, but then these experiences had continued. Now, again, you know, this was long before the internet. Jane had no interest in the subject. There were no UFO books or magazines in her house. I met her husband, I met her family. And she was experiencing you know, when she had these experiences, she says, I felt as if I was pregnant, Philip. But of course I wasn't yet. She already had a daughter, so she knew what pregnancy was like. And she said, I had these strange visions of having a child with these creatures that's half human and half alien. And she described it as looking like one of the cheap dolls you used to buy as a kid, and it had all this awful hair in it. Now, I used to transcribe all these interviews with her, and they were then in the mail, because there was no email. They were in the post to Bud Hopkins in New York. I knew Bud at this point very well, and of course he was talking about the same type of experiences, but across the Atlantic. Bud coined them the smart baby dreams, and these were what some of the abductees he was working with had also experienced. So my question was, how do you get a lady on one side of the Atlantic experiencing something exactly the same as somebody else 3,000 or 4,000 miles away on the other side of the Atlantic without reading any of Bud's work? You know, Bud, this wasn't in any of Bud's books at the times, you know, and you know, it still baffles me. She was just an ordinary lady with a you know, a partner and a daughter, and you know, she was convinced they were aliens. But how come individuals thousands of miles apart, Dean, report the same thing? I mean, you tell me.